exciting article. It doesn't read as anything more or anything less. It is lengthy, but it's not anything that reveals insane information that would have to make it get taken down immediately. Stuff like this really exists everywhere. Going back some more, January of 2006, we do definitely have a post that is much more conspiracy oriented, as well as an older design of the homepage. But again, there is stuff like this out there. It's surely not something that would make the website have to go down, and while the archives go on for a very long time before this, and even occur with more frequency, it really is much of the same. The only differences are various website design changes. In conclusion, it's just a run-of-the-mill alien website. There is nothing huge revealed here that made it have to be taken down. So I guess the one other question to ask is, well, why was it taken down? The likely answer here is really simple. The reason the site is down is probably because its domain name expired. This is a pretty common reason for why a website would go down, and with it clearly not being taken down by the government trying to hide some insane truth about extraterrestrial creatures, this is most likely what's happening here. Also, with a super large 4-year gap between archives from the years of 2013 to 2017, it's possible that this has even happened before, as there was no such gap even close to that big before or after. The waning popularity of the site is also apparent from the archives, as they were at a clear peak in the mid-2000s and tanked from then. Maybe the owner or owners of the site simply decided that the lifespan of the site was done. That pretty much concludes our saga of Alien Zoo. Perhaps it will one day return to the cyber world. For now, let's continue the dive. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to come face to face with Bigfoot and be able to successfully eliminate it? Well, then this next post is for you. This is a condensed version of an old set of photos from X that was titled How to Kill, which is at least 12 years old according to the dates on my files at least. Very likely it was LARP, and still contains the original spelling errors, but on topic and interesting anyways. As you can see, this thread is about how to kill various cryptids throughout the world, and as it says, when they mean various, they truly do mean many. And when they mean many, the process of taking these cryptids out are explained in extreme detail. As for the condensed file, I downloaded it, and it contains 10 entire pages doing exactly what it said it would. And well, yeah, the methods for killing these cryptids are just as in-depth and specific as it had said. Here's an example. For the Kraken, according to this user, this is what was said. Fortunately, murdering Kraken is simpler than it seems. Ensure it surfaces first before injecting it with a massive dose of tetrodotoxin, a poison found in the Japanese blowfish. As Kraken are native to the North Atlantic, they are very unacquainted and therefore vulnerable to this very potent poison. The creature should expire and under its own great weight, sink below the ocean. This is only an excerpt from the Kraken section, and this is just one of 10 pages worth of these descriptions. And remember, this is the condensed version of his posts, as the originals are said to be much longer than it was put here. Safe to say, this is insanity. This post is most likely LARP, but at the same time, there is just so much detail as to what must be done to each of these creatures. It just truly leaves us in awe. It is definitely an incredibly interesting read, and hey, maybe this is the reason we don't see cryptids anymore. The next post on our deep dive is a very simple question, but one that absolutely piqued my interest. What is the evolutionary purpose of the Uncanny Valley? This is a question that I somehow never even thought about, even though the Uncanny Valley was a highlighted point in a previous particular video of ours. Before getting into the research, I wanted to quickly define what the Uncanny Valley is. While I am sure nearly everybody here knows what it is, just in case you are somebody that isn't familiar, here you go. The Uncanny Valley is basically the response that humans experience when viewing something that is extremely close to looking human, but doesn't. This is most commonly seen on robots, but can also be seen in CGI, whether that be in movies or video game graphics. In another instance we have seen, it may even extend to certain animals. The most common reaction you would get to seeing these things is minor discomfort, but for many others, this discomfort can be quite extreme. The term was actually first coined in the 1970s. A professor at the Tokyo Institute of Technology first explained that the more human-like a robot appears, the more appealing it is, but only to a certain point. As he described, extreme discomfort in these robots getting too close to human-like, while of course never being able to be exact. As the post said, we obviously don't know why we react this way to seeing these types of things. Studies have shown little kids reacting this way and of course adults doing the same, showing that this is definitely a reaction that is embedded in the brain from the beginning. Of course, the question still persists. Why does this even make us so uncomfortable? What is the point of us reacting like this? Well, we don't have a definitive answer for this, but we do have a handful of theories, so let's go through those. The most compelling theory I found revolving around this would have to be the categorization theory. This theory proposes that because our brain categorizes human and non-human differently, when something is seen that seems to simultaneously fit both categories while also not fitting either category, it simply leaves our brain confused and unable to fully categorize what it is seeing, which triggers panic in it, causing this reaction. There are many other theories, such as one where it's claimed that our instincts think of these off faces and associate them with death and disease, which is why it makes us so uncomfortable. But that one really doesn't do it for me. There are even many scientists that don't believe the uncanny valley is a real thing, although with some of the studies I've seen, that's really one that I'm not sure about. The first theory I found is by far the most likely one to me, but if any of you have any theories you'd like to share, please feel free to comment them down below. Last up on our 4chan dive is something simply titled The Nuclear Myth. The title is pretty self-explanatory. As you can see, the user literally just asks about something called the nuclear myth. Pretty normal stuff, right? Well, not exactly. After saying this, the user was just banned. This raises several questions. Of course, the obvious question is, why exactly was the user banned? But besides that, we don't even know what the user in question was even referring to when mentioning this supposed nuclear myth. So let's attempt to get to the bottom of both of these questions. As for what the nuclear myth even is, there are two possible theories that I've seen. The first of which is the possibility that this user was referring to the conspiracy theory that nukes just don't even exist. This is an extremely convoluted and ever-changing conspiracy theory. It's so ever-changing that from person to person, you might hear a completely different explanation as to why nukes don't exist. As a result, we're not going to get into the details of every single variation of this theory. It'd be pretty much impossible. But this is a very solid possibility as to what this user may have been referring to. After all, this is 4chan. Conspiracy theories are really a dime a dozen over here, so I personally find this to be quite possible. As for the other possibility, the user may have been referring to the theory that nukes have actually existed since Babylonian times. This is a conspiracy theory that isn't nearly as convoluted and ever-changing as our aforementioned one. Basically, it stems from a Babylonian hieroglyphic. As you can see, this hieroglyphic seems to depict the king at the time dropping a nuclear bomb, and a subsequent explosion ensuing as a result. I dug and found out that this is quite the controversial theory, as there is massive speculation from both sides as to whether technology such as this could have even been possible, or if this hieroglyphic was even as old as it is claimed to be. But in reality, the truth behind this theory isn't really the point here. The point is, this is quite the popular subject, and it is very possible that this was what the OP was referring to when creating this post in question. As for figuring out why this user could have possibly been banned for posting something so seemingly mundane, it gets extremely difficult to pin it down. I'm sure you all know that 4chan gets much worse than this. This site has a long history of horrific and vile content, light years worse than what was seen here. This site was, since the beginning, a place with limited moderation, as that's kind of the point to it. The only times where you can consistently be banned from it is if you mention that you are younger than 18 or if you post revealing content involving minors. Pretty much anything involving minors. Honestly, this is a complete and utter mystery that has us scratching our heads without even the slightest lead. The strangest part of it all is that when users repost the OP's question or even talk about the nuclear myth, nothing ever happens to them. This was a one-off incident, and that's what makes it so much more confusing. If any of you watching have any leads as to what may have happened here, please leave it in the comments below. Any theory is much appreciated, as we will be sure to read each and every comment as always. So, I guess that's it for the nuclear myth. Hi, and welcome to Debunk File. My name is Sep, and today we're going down our 5th 4chan dive. Before this video begins, I want to address a warning. This episode features quite a bit of disturbing content. If you are sensitive to discussion of blood, gore, or anything of that sort, consider clicking off the video now. This addition to the deep dive really isn't for the faint of heart, and features by far our most disturbing discoveries yet. Besides that, there isn't really any intro necessary here. All I'll say is that if you haven't seen our previous episodes, there's a whole playlist worth of fascinating and disturbing finds before this one, so go check those out too. With all of that out of the way though, let's just get on with the dive. For the first post on our dive here, we have The Mystery Sheep Killer. And well, let's just give this a read. Alright detectives, I'm gonna need an explanation real quick because I'm starting to get a little bit worried. Part 1 of 2. Be me, live in rural Denmark on farm entire life. Own animals, most of them being sheep. Feels comfy man.exe. One night hear an absolutely blood-curdling scream about 5 AM. Words can't even describe it. Hear 2 of these. Feel a bit uneasy, but whatever. Since I live out in the country and next to a small forest, I'm used to hearing some ungodly dying screams of animals, so I didn't think too much of it. But shit was still exceptionally uneasy to listen to. Next morning. Spot nothing out of the ordinary. Day after this. Have electronic classes. Spot my dad dragging a sheep carcass through our back garden, presumably to the place where we bury the animals that die unexpectedly. I go out to check to inspect the corpse. He's right. Not only did the thing cleanly eat only half of its face cleanly to the bone, but it also devoured its tongue and its left ear. Pick is the pick I took of my sheep. I inspect the corpse closer in order to look for the death blow that killed my dear boy. There is none. Whatever killed my dear sheep did not do it quickly. Snap a pic and check out the spot where my dad found the corpse. Get to the spot where my dad found the body. No sign of struggle. Okay, now I'm confused. .wat. All I saw were a few feathers. Situation around the killing is too unusual for it to have been one of the many eagles/hawks in the area. Plus, they never attack animals of this size. If it would have been a huge fox or some shit, it wouldn't have only targeted the face. A fox is the only animal in this part of the country where this shit would even be possible. Even then, it seems highly unlikely. What do you boys think it could have been? Yeah, I'm at a loss for words honestly here. What in the world could have possibly done this to the sheep? As you can see, the skin is just straight up gone and only bone remains. There isn't too much we can add on to here because honestly, we don't even know what to say. We definitely don't know of an animal that would kill a sheep this meticulously. So if you have any other theories in the comments, please write them down for us. For now though, we're just going to continue the dive. The next post on our dive is very short and very to the point. It simply says, I found this in the depths of NASA's high-res photos. Can anyone explain it before I never sleep again? In the photo, this appears. Pictured here appears to be some sort of extraterrestrial squid-like creature. I don't really need to explain why this is such a huge deal, but what I did want to get to the bottom of was, of course, if this was real or not. Because who knows, maybe this is some superbly done Photoshop. If it wasn't that, I wondered if it was some sort of smudge on the camera lens, but it seems way too detailed for that to be the case. Regardless, my first step here was to reverse image search it, and it's not fake. The original picture that the OP found is actually from the Apollo 8 expedition all the way back in the 1960s, and I was able to find a whole article about this phenomenon on cognitomatrix.com. Honestly, the article doesn't give too much in the way of new information, and actually gets pretty ridiculous towards its ending, but it does do a good job at explaining that this photo was actually quite a big deal upon its discovery. The biggest takeaway from this article, though, was a quote that it took from a Russian scientist in an article from 1997. The scientist stated that such materials for the same laws that enabled the birth of life on our planet may have been aggregated and involved in some form of life, adapting to extreme conditions such as those of the universe. These organisms are called Zeroid. So yeah, the scientist was basically arguing in favor of organisms being out there that adapted to the severe conditions out in space. And this photo here may be an example of that. I'm not sure how ready I am to say that our definitive proof of aliens in our solar system lies right here with this image, but I will say that it seems a lot more convincing than most of what I've seen. If any of you have any theories as to what is going on here, again, we'd love to hear it. The next post is simply known as the chlorine gas test. And again, as a quick heads up, this post contains some very disturbing content. With that being said, let's just get into this one. It begins with our OP stating that they need to test out a gas mask, and after that, they show that they are creating chlorine gas, asking what could possibly go wrong. Just a few minutes later, the absolute worst that you'd think of when seeing this happens. Holy fuck, it hurts. Might have to go to the hospital. Over the next few minutes, we get to see updates of our OP's skin quite literally melting off right before our very eyes, all while other users are in absolute disbelief and worry about what is occurring before them. The last post made was simply, "Goodbye, K." And that's it. The OP was never seen again, and in this instant, it's probably safe to assume the worst. As other users stated, it's hard to understand what was going through the poster's head when he was thinking up this idea, as chlorine gas does not just act on breathing pathways, it melts flesh, as we were very clearly able to see. I looked for possible articles and the sort about this in order to get some confirmation, and I was unable to receive that, but in this instance, there really isn't much of a mystery. Rather, what we just witnessed was one of the most tragic and disturbing things I have ever seen on the internet. This final post, for lack of a better term, is straight up insane, but off the initial image, it doesn't seem to be that much. As you can see, it shows a super blurry picture of some creature in the snow, and it just says, "Boy, I sure do love mutated penguin spiders." For 4chan standards, this really is something you could find all the time, but when reading more in, it gets, well, extraordinary. The OP states that they are the foremost expert on this subject, and that their father was stationed in Antarctica at McMurdo Station. They end the first message by saying, "He's told me things. Y'all wanna hear some fucked up shit?" After saying that, this post follows. Some background. My dad is a doctor, was stationed at McMurdo for 11 months in the 90s, not saying what year because he was the only doc there and y'all could track me down. Frequently we went out on scientific expeditions. First and foremost, there were some areas people just didn't go to. They weren't environmentally hazardous, they just were avoided for one reason or another. When my dad asked one of the researchers who had been up there for 10 years, he went pale and told him to shut up. It was about 30 miles south, 10 east of McMurdo. They took a 5-mile detour around whatever the hell was there. In the following comments, however, he mentioned some creatures that his father saw. Thirdly, there were the Striders. Big 5-legged things that crawled across the continent at night or in snowstorms. There were sightings from the military personnel there. Most of McMurdo was in the US Navy. My dad had a Polaroid of one of these footsteps in a track from one of the Dakars they had, and it was easily a foot deep into the snow that was already packed down from a 10-ton truck. He was asked a number of things, but most notably and commonly was asked about just how big these Striders were. According to the OP, these things were absolutely massive. The OP mentioned being told that the footsteps were at least 30 to 40 feet apart and claimed they were 7 to 8 stories tall with 5 legs instead of 2. Yeah, insane. There was another story he told though, and this was a very specific one. Like Morrowind Striders? I don't know, never seen them. KK my guy, so as I said, my dad was a doctor, got yelled at by a superior officer who said they didn't need none of you unwanted smart types around here. Guy was a prick and hated anyone who wasn't a grunt or a researcher. Let leak to my dad that he was the replacement for a doc who had snooped around, tried to scare my dad and shit. Guy was a total douche. One day, a guy who my dad knows for a fact isn't at McMurdo or any of the nearby bases comes in, escorted, with severe lacerations. He's told that the guy fell. My dad calls bullshit. The cuts were too clean to be ice or rocks, plus no debris left in wound. Guy's delirious, and while he's under anesthesia, starts talking about things he probably shouldn't be saying. Something about, we let them loose, and they were frozen when we thought they were dead. He starts to say something else, but the guards yell at him to shut the fuck up and gag him. That's right, they gagged a guy who was only getting oxygen from a mask. My dad flips it and rips it off, yelling at them and asking what the fuck they are doing. The guard sticks his M16 in my dad's face, forces him back to the quarters, and doesn't let him out till the dude is patched up and waiting on the next plane from South America. People were, of course, really entranced by this thread, as are we, but of course, many asked for some semblance of proof, especially since all there was up to this point was the absurdly blurry picture that the initial post had. Believe it or not though, they actually gave some, in form of a plaque. It was straight from Antarctica with their dad's name on it as seen here, and another item which has the words McMurdo Station right on it. This left us pretty shocked. However, the story doesn't even end there either. This thread was super long, but there is one more that we wanted to mention here, and that is this. I can't get it running tonight. I'm honestly really tired after work tomorrow morning, but my dad literally just woke up and I asked him and he told me something he didn't already tell me. So people die in Antarctica. It happens. It's cold and accidents happen. Every time someone died during the winter snowstorms though, he had to wait for them to thaw and sew them back together. Similar wounds from the person who dipped in the summer, except one man, another he didn't know, who was missing his lower half. This guy was carted in by similar guards, but not the same. His intestines had spilled out and my dad had to sew on fake clothes lower half after sealing up this guy's torso. They then dressed him in a battle dress. The official cause of death is hypothermia, but we both know that's bullshit. His lower abdomen from the end of the ribcage down has been ripped off violently. There's shit out there, Annans. You better fucking believe it. With these posts all wrapped up now, this was definitely the longest and most in-depth post we've ever come across so far, but some questions still remain. Really, the main question is, do we believe this? On one hand, the OP did what few posts of this sort have ever done. They gave legitimate proof that their father was actually in Antarctica. On the other hand, proof regarding the cryptid itself is still yet to be seen, besides that super blurry image. This raises quite a few suspicions. That image is very conveniently blurry, and while the OP did show a computer and claimed that they would get it working, since it had higher quality image of the cryptid on it, they never did get it. It really hurts this case here. A lot of the stories do also give me heavy The Thing vibes, which definitely wouldn't help either. At the same time, I'd imagine it would be very difficult to fake these plaques from Antarctica. I mean, sure, it could be done, but would someone really waste that much time and effort for a little 4chan thread? I'd say that's unlikely. Maybe the father really did work at this McMurdo station, and the OP was just creating a story that they knew would have the luxury of providing real proof, thereby upping its realism. That's what I put my money on in this instance. But hey, none of us have been to Antarctica before, so maybe it really does hide creatures beyond our mind's comprehension. That's going to do it for this edition of the 4chan Deep Dive. This was a much lengthier one than usual, and honestly, maybe the best string of posts we have found yet on our dives here. So we really hope you enjoyed this addition to our series. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to follow all of our social medias for updates and exclusive content, all linked in the description. We would also love you guys to consider joining our brand new Patreon, Debunk Plus. For only $1 a month, you get access to videos early, exclusive content, and our brand new podcasts, which come out every week. At the moment, we are on episode 9. And of course, make sure to like this video, share this with your friends, and subscribe. As always, my name is Sep from Debunk File. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye. Hi, and welcome to Debunk File. My name is Sep, and today we're going on our 6th 4chan dive. Once again, there isn't too much of note to say here before we get things started, so we're just going to get right into it. So strap up, and let's go on a dive. On our 4chan dives, we typically try to include at least one post in each video that is very well known, but fascinating nonetheless. And that will be the case here. The post of the 4chan bunker is one of the more famous threads in the website's history, and if you don't already know of it, you are in for a ride.
3 days ago, my last living grandparent, my mother's father, passed away at the age of 89. He was a World War II vet, and my mom tells me that after returning home from the Navy, he was never quite the same. In fact, he was pretty paranoid about nearly everything. I was never really allowed to stay at his house. In 1965, his wife died suddenly, with no real explanation. My mother tells me that my grandfather became extremely fearful of a nuclear war with the communists, and that he started to dig a bomb shelter out of the rock and limestone on his land. I had never seen the bomb shelter until today, when the family was going through my grandfather's belongings. Pig related, it's the entrance. I had only ever asked my grandfather about his hand-dug cave one time in my life, which was when I was about 16 or so, when we got together for Christmas. He didn't really seem to want to talk about it. He just told me to never ever go there because, in his words, it's just a damn... What the word in the blank was, I've never been able to figure it out. No amount of googling helped me determine what he said. All I know is it sounded like "ah so air." The way he said it was creepy enough that I never asked about it again. This picture's a view back towards the door after you go down some steps. When my mother asked me to go and check it out and see if I could find anything worth putting in the estate sale, to be honest, I was pretty excited. I thought maybe I'd find old gas masks, non-perishable food items from the 60s, and maybe even some forms of old entertainment that he had planned to use to keep the family busy in the event of an attack. The picture is the first hallway, which curves off to the right at the end. The first thing I found was this rudimentary toilet. Of course, time wasn't kind to it, so there wasn't much left. It had obviously been in disrepair for years. I just snapped a picture of it and kept going. Although I did have to admire the work that had to have gone into chipping away the rock, one heave at a time. But further down the hallway, I came to nothing more than a bunch of old rusted garbage on the floor. I instantly felt my heart sink because I had such high hopes for what this exploration would yield. It was just beginning to look like my grandfather had just given up at some point on his dream of crafting a shelter. But you'll notice that, in the previous picture, the hallway curves off to the left. I was expecting to hit a flat wall of rock, but instead I found a huge iron door that was padlocked shut. Fortunately for me, it had become rusted to all hell, so I was actually able to just pick up a decent sized rock off the floor and hit the padlock until it busted the entire loop it went through. Opening the door was another story though. It was extremely heavy and had become rusted shut over the years. I found a shovel back in the garbage heap and used all my strength to force it open with a lever action. The only thing back here was a hallway that did abruptly end where he had stopped digging, but there was a doorway off to the right. I went through the doorway and inside, this room looked more like a cavern than a bomb shelter. As I looked around, I noticed this carving in the stone. At first I thought, oh no big deal, maybe it just came back here to pray or something. But that's when I started to notice that there were more carvings. Suddenly I see this face, carved into the rock. There were faces everywhere. Seriously. It was as though there were a bunch of ghostly faces staring you down in that room. And here's another example. I noticed that while the previous one appeared to be a soft female face, this one was an angry male face. And there were really quite a few of them. I don't know, probably 6 or 7. And they were all carved into the walls as though they were facing that cross carving, worshipping it or something. And then I saw this one. Unlike every single other carving in this room, which were faces, this one was clearly meant to be a skull. It seemed very out of place, since I felt that the rest of the room had religious connotations to it. Why was there a skull? Found out soon enough. I happened to look down at the ground below the skull carving, and there, sitting in a bunch of concrete rubble, was a motherfucking bone. And don't get me wrong, I'm not just a fucking Nancy. This was no deer bone. This was clearly a human bone. My heart was pounding out of my chest. As I started to look more closely, I saw more bones coming out of the concrete. as though human remains had been dumped in a batch of quick dry cement or something. Then I could have sworn I heard a quiet laugh from the corner of that room, and I fucking bolted. I ran out of that room like the devil was chasing me. I ran all the way out to the shelter and all the way back to the house.
And that about does it. As stated, this is a very infamous one, but it still remains one of the most fascinating on the platform. And like any 4chan post, we of course need to go over the validity of what we have just read. In reality, there are multiple ways to look at this. If you believe it is real, there would still be remaining questions, such as the many people that wonder if the bone that was found really belonged to a human or not. Some believers of this thread think that they may have been the bones of some animal, rather than a human. Of course, that doesn't answer nearly every question that would arise if you think this post is real, but it would answer the creepiest question. If you think it isn't real, you'd likely point to this just being some kind of set or place of that sort, and for it just simply being a little too ridiculous to think this all happened. For me, the main reason I don't think that this post is real would have to be with the way that it is written. It definitely has that author feel to it that makes me believe it is fabricated. We've actually caught flack for using this reason as to why some posts may be fake in the past, and that's because we're usually unable to give direct examples as to what we mean by that. Usually it's something that is hard to explain, but thankfully I do have a direct example as to what I'm talking about here. It all comes down to his comment about the word that he cannot remember, but almost does. It seems we can't remember the word, but leaves it just close enough to where we can figure it out. In this case, a word that is close to his pronunciation is ossuary, which refers to a site that is made to serve as a final resting place for human skeletal remains. I don't know about you, but that entire thing just seems way too fitting, and is exactly the type of thing I'm referring to when I make that point. That fact alone is enough for me to not believe that what happened here is legitimate. Even though I don't believe in the post, it doesn't take away from how creepy it is, and so I hope you enjoyed this read if you weren't already familiar with it. If you were, then I hope you enjoyed that throwback. For now though, we're just gonna continue to dive. The second 4chan post of the night is one that is simply known as the Monin Tunnels. The post reads, "Hi X. On one of the recent iceberg chart threads, someone mentioned the Monin Tunnels not being on iceberg. When I went to Google what these tunnels were, the only results I got was the original thread and pic related. Does anyone know more about it?" Now, without seeing the image, this seems like a pretty run-of-the-mill post. However, the image in question is absolutely terrifying. As you can see, the image above almost appears to be of two men after a kill, and then repliers to this thread noticed that very quickly. With that being shown, now you can suddenly see why the OP wants to know this photo's backstory so badly. Is this truly what it appears to be, or is there something else going on here? Well, unfortunately, I do not know. 4chan has had posts of this level of darkness in the past before, but it's frankly impossible to prove or disprove anything in this entire post. With the OP not being able to read EXIF data, I decided to read it instead, and as expected, there wasn't anything in there. What makes it trickier is the fact that the OP stated this photo came from an iceberg thread, but they also didn't link said thread at all, and finding whatever thread this came from is, well, impossible. The only other step to take in order to find the source of this image is, of course, to reverse image search it. Unfortunately though, it also yielded no results besides the thread we were reading, so that means the only thing we can do from this point on is speculate. While it's not out of the realm of possibility for some iceberg posts to find some real image of an atrocity being committed, it's also very easy for a photo of this sort to be staged. That is also something that has happened on 4chan in the past, and maybe what is happening here too. As for what theory seems more convincing here, I'm gonna leave this one to you guys. Feel free to write your input in the comments below on what you think is going on in this image. One thing is for sure though, that post haunted me when I first came around it, and I wish there was more to search for. With that being said, let's just continue the dive.
いいですわね。攻撃支援のための私。
それじゃあ出発しようか。みんな、僕のルートに沿って行動してね。
Like our first post of the night, this next post is also a lengthy story. However, unlike that one, this one is basically unknown. I accidentally stumbled on it during a deep search in X's archives, and the story which I found is a true journey, to say the least. Hello, X. I'm not well versed in the spoopy, so let me just tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I was at the library and I found a book called Imperial Dogmatic Spherical Holes. It disappeared since then, which means who knows what the fuck. What struck me about the book was the obviously amateurish binding, as if it didn't belong there, and there was no library sticker on the spine. Looked like something from a Vanity Press website. Sure enough, I take it home without checking it out, no sweat, because it looks X-ish. Mostly the book makes no sense other than the introduction, which is about how you're supposed to be high on cough syrup, or the rest of the book doesn't make sense. After the introduction, it's just a bunch of mostly English gibberish plus pictographs and seemingly random squiggles. I forgot about it for a few days until later when I'm bored and want to get high. So I think, what the hell, and drink about enough syrup for a third plateau trip. I've done DXM before, but I'm no experienced junkie. And crazily enough, the book starts making sense. And even crazier, it claims to be directions to some lost age of wit. Man, I don't know. And even crazier, the book speaks extensively about the town I live in and events that have taken place in the last few days, even though I got the book weeks ago. But of course, I'm high, so it's just part of the ride to me. Anyway, the book tells me to go to a cave near my house and not read any further until I do, because I need something more for the following pages to make sense. I try to read further anyway, but the pages are just blank, although a dark gray color. I decide to go to the cave because #YOLO. When I get to the cave, the next pages are no longer gray, but instead detail some kind of Africa tear dance that I'm supposed to do. And I start laughing out loud like it says stuff like, wave your arms to the east and repeat this syllable low 3 times and whatever. By now you've predicted that I did it. Duh. The syrup feels like it's getting stronger, and suddenly I go fully out of it, and now I'm standing in front of a waterfall with a cave behind it. There's a creepy figure standing behind the cave. It looks a mostly featureless human with bluish gray skin and a simplistic face as if it was carved out of stone. At this point, I'm gonna stop trying to set up the drama because I'm a writer, but basically what happened was this entity told me his name was Lomac, and that he was a nearly dead ancient being once called God, and that he found it interesting that a human would bother with him again after all this time. So I stand by the waterfall for what seems like forever and talk to Lomac. I don't really remember seeing his face move, but I can't really remember a voice either. It was more like I could just feel what he was saying to me, and I knew that he was male-ish. Lomac tells me that he's from a time before recorded history, when men were half-men and religious ideas were barely even coherent. He says that he's become ignorant of Earth and almost forgot about it until I showed up, and after he picks my brain for what things are like nowadays, he says that he could be considered an early god of magic sorcerers. Then he asks why I came, and I tell him about the book. He doesn't know who wrote the book and says that he barely knows or cares how it worked, but that if I feel compelled that what I'm experiencing is the truth, then it would be possible to revive him on Earth if I want. So why not? We spend what seems like another eternity by the waterfall, and he supposes that he needs a sigil now. So I make the thing, I post it in the OP under his direction. I guess that's the official sigil of Lomac now. He says that he expects nothing from me as his prophet, and having a large mass of followers does not concern him. His mantra the whole time seems to be, expect nothing, and he was generally a really chill, possibly imaginary dude to talk to. Trying to wrap this up because I hate reading long posts on image boards, and I hate typing them even more when nobody's going to read them. Lomac details to me that specifics to make an altar for him, and various other nagging little details that gods apparently care about, although he seems less strict than, say, traditional religious scriptures. I'll post some if anybody cares. Eventually I wake back up at the cave, but the book is gone. I'm still blown as fuck on the syrup. It felt like I had a moment of clarity while at the waterfall, but now that I'm back to the real world, I'm high again and I can't even think straight. I make it back to my house and a little later drew the sigil on my computer, plus wrote various things I can remember about the experience, and thus concludes this epic tale of I still haven't made an altar, bought anything to try this out because I'm broke at the moment. So what was it, X? Some degenerate's drug adventure, a demon pretending to be a god, an actual forgotten god of yea ancient times. Your mother's tulpa? I don't know much about occultism. Does anything of this sound even remotely familiar? While that is the extent of this crazy story, the OP also provided instructions on how to revive Lomac, and 4chaners naturally tried it out, with some even claiming that it worked. Now that doesn't really prove anything to me, as anybody can just say it worked, and many people on the site would just say that to go along with it. But one thing that is very interesting to note is that unlike every other one of these posts, the OP did not abandon it. He truly stuck around until the end, answering any question that would come his way, and some of his answers actually helps this post's case, in a way. While I don't believe our OP saw a god and went on a true mystical adventure for a second, the fact that he was high for the entirety of all of these stories makes me wonder whether it was just some crazy trip. And what's even more telling is the fact that the OP also believes that that may still be possible, even with seeing Lomac a few times now. While that may definitely be what is going on here, the fact that there are no results when you search up this book, and the fact that there were also never any pictures posted of the book, it majorly hurts the likelihood of this story too. It may have been some crazy trip and the OP doesn't come off the way most of the people who make more clearly fake stories do, but the coincidences are still too much to ignore, and I don't buy this one either. With that being said, you can feel free to theorize with this one too, as it was an extremely fascinating read. But for now, we're going to get into the final post of our dive.
相手のターゲットは誰かな。
So as you've noticed, this video had more lengthy stories than normal, but we are ending the video with our most terrifying find we have ever gotten so far. As a quick warning before we get into this one, I must say that this post includes some very graphic imagery, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. This is some serious disturbing stuff. It is simply known as, what does B keep in the freezer? And it begins with a very simple question. What does B keep in the freezer? Guess what's in mine? After this was posted, the board did what anyone would, and began guessing. Some of the answers were as simple as cake, and some of them were as disturbing as a cat. But one of the guesses was a body. And the OP immediately chimed in and said that they were right. They said well done, and showed what was in that freezer. What appeared before the users was quite literally a severed leg, like this possibly could have been, and others asked to see more. And more was what they got, including one with a hand that even had the random board scribbled on it, confirming that the leg was right in front of him. These weren't just images taken from somewhere. This post gets under my skin more than any other we have covered this far. I'm no expert on this subject, but this severed leg looks real to my eye. If this were to be done as a sort of prop, then it's an extremely convincing one. But if this is indeed a real leg, how did the OP get it? The most morbid possibility here is, of course, that this is some murderer. And while that is the first thing you may think of and could be possible, it just can't be proven. I truly hope that this is not what's going on here. We do always cite 4chan as the place with the most unhinged people on the internet, and while that does scare me here, I still can't say without a shadow of a doubt that this is what we are dealing with here. Maybe there is somehow a different explanation. Another likely theory as to how this person would have gotten this leg would be if they were a mortician. Obviously that would give you access to bodies, although I can't imagine that you come across completely severed legs too often, but what do I know? Whatever the case, I'd like to think that this theory is more likely than our first one, and again there is a solid chance that we are looking at a prop here, but it just looks so real to me. I can't definitively say what's going on either, Truthfully, this post really got under my skin, and I truly can't make heads or tails as to what's really going on here. The only thing that's certain is that I will not be sleeping tonight. And that about does it for this edition of 4chan Deep Dives. As you saw, this video featured more long stories than we typically do, and we're curious to see how you all felt about that. So let us know how you felt about this selection this time around. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to follow all of our social medias for updates and exclusive content, all linked in the description. We'd also love you guys to join our Patreon Debunk Plus. For only $1 a month, you get access to videos early, exclusive content, and podcasts. I promise we're bringing the podcast back. They are coming back, and they will be here to stay. Of course, make sure to like this video, share this with your friends, and subscribe. As always, my name is Seth from Debunk File. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye. Hi, and welcome to Debunk File. My name is Seth, and today we are once again going on a dive. If this is your first 4chan deep dive, then welcome. We've had a lot of newcomers find us through this series, and I'm sure there's some more here as well. We really hope you enjoy this series. If this isn't your first one, then as always, sit back and let's get right into it. For our first post of the night, technically this may be cheating a bit, as the 4chaner in question found a horrifying discovery on Facebook, but nonetheless, it is something that must be seen. Even on the Facebook post, it shows somebody that had also found it, and wasn't the one that originally posted it. Regardless, this is what it says. Facebook isn't letting me share this and I wonder why. Not my post, just sharing it. I wasn't gonna post this, but I can't stop trying to figure out what the fuck this thing is. I heard something scream at like 11:30 last night and went on my side of the yard and found this thing. It was dead when I found it. Share with your friends. What is that? This is the main question people are asking, and with 4chan being, well, 4chan, naturally a ton of people thought it was some sort of extraterrestrial creature. Especially with the admittedly very strange claim of Facebook not allowing the post to be shared. Thankfully, reverse image searching the images in question yields many results. As you can see, there are a multitude of articles about the situation, and with that, there are a ton more alien claims. According to almost all of these articles, the sighting of this creature came very shortly after thousands of people reported seeing a UFO right in the area. I was also able to find the actual original posting of the creature. So it seems like the theory that this is actually some sort of alien is actually by far the most popular, but is that really what we are seeing here? Is this very post the proof that we have always been waiting for? Well, it isn't admittedly too likely, especially when stacked up against some other theories. The other main theory that I've seen is that this is some sort of fetus that was likely attacked by a predator, hence the disfigurement. Of course, the next question that would follow that is, well, what animal is it? And the most popular choice among that is that it is a deer fetus. Now, while I did do research, I don't admittedly have as keen of an eye or the best knowledge on the anatomy of a deer to confirm or deny that theory, but I will say that it is much more plausible than the alien theory, and it may also be able to explain that screaming too. Beyond that, some people even wonder whether it's a cryptid, or if it's fake entirely. While we can't wholeheartedly give an answer as to what this thing truly is, the deer theory definitely seems the most plausible, at least to us. But who knows? Maybe aliens truly have been hiding right under our noses the whole time. For our next 4chan post, we have a terrifying moment coming from a website I've actually used in the past before. Hello. Before I delete all traces of this, as it gave me an odd and unpleasant feeling, I wanted to write about it here so it is not lost forever. I recently found out about a website called artflow.ai, where an AI generates portraits based on whatever text you input. For fun, I tried all sorts of words to see what would come out of it, including words like Jesus, God, and Satan. First of all, the generated results surprised me. Satan especially, as he looked exactly like the appearance he had in nightmares I experienced a while ago. Since the website can only keep 6 generated portraits at a time, I wanted to save this batch I generated, including the Satan portrait. Well, when I went to look at my folder with all the saved images, the Satan portrait changed. All the other portraits were identical from the website except Satan's. I wish I was making this up, but I swear I'm telling the truth. His hair had become messier and more gray, as well as his beard. His skin tone changed and looks more cracked. He smiles with his teeth with an insane-looking stare instead of the more stoic look from the image I generated. And worst of all, his eyes are glowing red, and it looks like blood is dripping from his lips. I don't know what to make of this. There could be some logical reasons behind how this could have happened, but not once in my life have I ever saved an image just for it to turn into something else. And of all the portraits I made, only the Satan one changed. As soon as I saw the thumbnail, I felt odd pressure and vibrations in my body. My religious mother told me to instantly delete the file. I will upload it here first, and then follow up with a screenshot of what it looked like on the website before disappearing. I sincerely hope it will not affect any of you negatively as it did with me. I just do not want this information to be lost. Make of it what you will. God bless. He also shared images of some of the other portraits, along with what the Satan image originally looked like as seen here. To be honest, this isn't one of which I could originally look like as seen here. To be honest, this isn't one of which I could properly give an answer for. It really does read genuine, but of course, it also isn't possible to literally prove that either. One thing is for sure, I definitely have never seen or heard of an image suddenly changing that drastically when saving it. As one last comment, the OP gave a possible theory as to what he thinks is the most logical explanation, having to do with the website possibly having a function to worsen any generated drawings of Satan, but that isn't true. While I wanted to believe the poster badly, I frankly can't. It seems just as likely that this glowing Satan was just another separate portrait made afterwards.
Not only that, but I myself actually wanted to test this out to see if it would happen too. This involved me literally waiting 800 entire minutes for the image to be made too, and after all that waiting, it didn't distort or anything. The original image is right here, and the one that I saved in my computer looks the exact same.
But still, the thought of an image that could actually be demonic was something that I found really intriguing, so it was certainly worth showing. If you have any different theories as to what could be going on here, we'd love to hear them. As for now, let's continue the dive. For our third post of the night, we have something that in some ways is slightly similar to our first post, but also much more disturbing. The day before yesterday, I was out walking alone in a woods in northern Scandinavia. I suddenly realized that the ravens are making a hell of a racket fighting over something. I figure it's probably a cadaver. Since I know the landowner, I figured I should investigate and inform him if I find anything odd. So I start walking over to the approximate location of the suspected cadaver, and sure enough, I see something lying on the ice of a frozen creek a bit further ahead. I start noticing puddles of blood around the cadaver in the snow, along with tracks that indicate a short but brutal struggle. I take a look at the cadaver and see it's a small roe deer. The odd thing is that it's in immaculate shape, with the exception that the neck has been eaten. Nothing else on the cadaver shows any sign of injury, which is very odd because whatever killed this deer, it wasn't wolves or an eagle. So I kneel down next to the cadaver to have a closer look. I reach out to move its neck to get a better look at the bite marks, and that's when I realize it's still warm. And not just lukewarm, it's full body temperature warm. Now it's pretty cold out, about -13°C with a strong wind chill. So it would have only taken a short while for the cadaver to start freezing, but even the blood on the ice was still liquid. Whatever killed this thing is still around here somewhere. At this point I get really paranoid and start looking around, but I don't see anything, so I take a closer look at the bite marks on the neck. The large blood vessels and the trachea have been bitten off very cleanly. It looks like something cut them with sharp scissors. So whatever killed this deer has very sharp, scissor-like teeth made for cutting through flesh efficiently. I look for tracks in the surrounding area, but I can't find any that make sense. The largest paw prints I find nearby are only slightly larger than fox prints, and it certainly was not a fox that killed this deer. I don't feel like staying any longer, so I snap a few photos and get the fuck out. On the way back, I call the landowner and tell him about it. He walked out there about 45 minutes later, but he never found the carcass. He found where it had been, and then he found drag marks. 3-kilometer long drag marks that lead over a frozen lake he didn't want to cross. I asked him if he saw any tracks, but he didn't see any either. Now this is really freaking me out. The only thing I think that could kill something like this is an Arctic lynx, but they are quite large and leave paw prints much larger than anything I could find. And they don't drag dead deer for 3 kilometers in less than an hour. Looks like the deer was laying dead on the ice for a while since it had melted the snow in the ice. Then there are some drag marks. My guess is that the creature had just killed the deer and eaten a bit of it, then started dragging it off, but it only got a few meters before I came trundling conspicuously through the woods and chased it off. Also, this creature must be very light, since it didn't leave any tracks, and it could easily walk around in ice that was far too weak to bear me. Here's a close-up on the neck. Now, in regards to what the body looked like, I'm not trying to have a re-upload happen again, so sadly that can't be shown here, but we will link the thread in the description for those that are curious. Basically though, the neck was as described, completely gone, pretty much down to the bone. That is certainly a really interesting condition to find something that is certain. There is definitely something terrifying in those woods. For our final post of the night, we have saved the longest for last. What we have here is a series of ghost stories regarding a very specific house our OP grew up in, but unlike the majority of ghost stories I've ever read, these ones truly feel different. They genuinely creeped me out. So without further ado, let's simply get right into them. First, I'd like to make this clear, that what I'm about to say is 100% true. I'm not making this stuff up, I don't have any explanations, and I don't believe in God. I just want to share my experiences and see if anyone has been through something similar, and if so, I'd like to hear it. The curiosity burns me yet. The scientist in me has debunked all, even my own bizarre experiences. I put them down to imagination, but I'll let you decide. Anyway, here goes. The first thing I experienced was when I was around 3 years old, and so have no recollection of it. The story was only told to me when I was about 9 or 10, and was presented as fact. The story goes, we'd recently moved into a new house. Mum, 2 bros, and a sis, and they had all gone off to school, leaving infant me and Mum alone. Anyway, I'm upstairs doing whatever boys do at 3, and she's downstairs doing whatever mums do. So, after an hour, the story goes, I come down and ask, "Who's the lady laying on your bed, Mom?" I then go on to describe a lovely conversation that I had with some mystery woman apparently laying on my mother's bed, and then went on to give a vague description of this nice woman. Ginger hair, walking stick, I even had a name, Jenny. So my mother goes and checks. Nothing, and rightly puts it down to the imagination of a child and ignored it. A few weeks later, after we'd started meeting neighbors and getting settled in, when she got into a conversation with a neighbor named Val. Val mentioned that her mother had lived at our house for many years and had gone off to a nursing home because of ill health. She had died in the nursing home a few weeks before we moved in. She had ginger hair and had a walking stick. Her nickname was Ginny. That was the start of Ginny. Right after this, obviously, somebody suggested that they think these may be fake, but is interested anyways, to where the OP laments again about how they don't know what to believe. Before getting into the next story, one other thing to mention before getting back into these stories is that there are actually so many of them. I wasn't able to include each and every last one. Because of that, again, we're going to have all this in the description, but I figured I'd let you know that the screenshots I show aren't every single one of them. Anyways, let's get back to these. Okay, a few years later, I remember the event, but I'm not sure how old I was. I'm guessing 5 or 6. It's evening time, around 8 PM I guess, and I'm sitting playing in the living room with my mom who's watching TV. My bros and sis are upstairs along with about 5 or 6 friends. I can hear them upstairs playing music and chatting when suddenly the music stops, followed by the heavy footsteps of my brother's friends coming down the stairs and swiftly out of the front door. My sister is crying in the background and my mom is looking annoyed at the fuss. My brothers come into the living room and are quickly quizzed by my mom, to which they both looked at each other puzzled. Apparently, in front of around 8 people, a catalog had risen from the floor near my brother's bedroom door, flew across the room, and hit my sister clean in the face. Everyone was in agreement to the events, even my crying sister, and from that point, the house got a reputation. Last one, then I'm going. This was roughly the same year, so I'm around 8 or 9. I'd been out playing whatever with a friend called Lee, and we were arriving at my house. We walk in and he heads up to the stairs toward my room. I glance in the living room to see an empty house, then follow him up the stairs. I just got to the top of the stairs when I hear him shout, "Oh, what the fuck was that?" Not in a scared of monsters tone, but more of a fear of OMG spiders tone. I turn the corner and hear him again, but it sounds more urgent this time. Suddenly he bolts past me to the top of the staircase, apparently scared shitless. He then misses the first step, slips, and goes down the full staircase on his ass, hitting the bottom with a thump. I race down the stairs asking what's the matter, just in time for him to get to his feet. He looks straight into the living room, screams, and then runs out the front door straight into the road, narrowly avoiding being run over. His father hears this commotion from across the street and comes over on friends were wary of coming to my house. I'd just like to add, Ginny never harmed me and I never felt threatened. I thought of her as a protector and my sisters would joke, "Yeah, she likes you." Apart from the book hitting my sister, nobody was harmed. People saw/experienced things in that house and I'm just glad to share some of it. From here on out, the stories get much, much creepier. Later that year, we had a fire in the house. A bedside lamp had fell over and had set a duvet alight. Firemen were called at God knows what time AM, and I stood outside in my pants with my mom and siblings watching the small blaze being tackled. The cause was never explained, though it was obvious the cause was that a lamp had set a duvet alight. Anyway, fires happen, so we'll ignore that. Anyway, a few weeks later, we go on a caravan holiday for 2 weeks. We had no idea what we were about to come home to. We arrive home and it was immediately obvious that the front main window had been smashed. We enter the home to find it in shambles, food packets strewn around the floor, beer cans, etc., talc powder/flour all over the floor. We'd been burgled. By kids by the looks of it, and it looked like they'd had a pretty good time making a mess before they left. Anyway, nothing was stolen because Mom had clearly left any valuables with neighbors and friends, but the house was a mess. Actually, my BMX was stolen. I'd had it only around 2 weeks, so I usually forget I ever had it. A neighbor confirmed a few nights ago that they had heard the sounds of breaking glass. Then hours later, it seems they had returned to have an impromptu party at my house. Neighbors had heard noise, but didn't know the source until the next day. Anyway, the neighbor asks, "Did you have somebody looking after the house for a few days?" Apparently, the day after we left for the caravan holiday, neighbors had noticed a figure looking out of the windows during the day. At night, they reported seeing a silhouette through the curtains, again apparently keeping watch. We never found an explanation, and soon after we moved house. I loved that house. It will always be my true home, and I'd move back there tomorrow, but I swear on my life, my kids' lives and my family's lives, and they'd agree that the house was haunted. Things didn't stop there though, LOL. We moved to London, and after a year or two of moving around from home to home, we settled in a house in Rains Park near Wimbledon. It was a lovely area, full of trees and open grasslands. We'd bought a dog, Bonnie the Staff, and Sis and I used to take her for long walks on Wimbledon Common, so everything was good. Things were looking up and the old house was forgotten about. Anyway, one night I'm laying in bed and I can hear the dog walking around my bed. I can hear and feel its footsteps as it's walking around the bed and its nails clicking on the carpet. Then it dived under the bed and is making a commotion. I can feel it pushing the mattress up from under me, so I say, "Oi, Bonnie, what are you doing? Come on, get up on the bed." To which there's no response. So again, I call out, "Come on the bed." Still no response. So annoyed, I throw my blanket off and get up and switch the light on. I get on my knees and look under the bed. Bonnie, she's not there. I call out, "Bonnie," and look around the room. Nothing. So I scratch my head for a second, then go downstairs to see where this damn dog is. Sure enough, she's curled up on the floor snoring like a baby. How long's Bonnie been there? I asked my mom. She's been here all night, was the response. This was the start of the haunting part 2. A few weeks later, I'm probably 11 or 12 at this point, I'm in my room doing whatever and decide to go for a piss. So I'm in the bathroom having a piss when I hear my brother behind me whisper through the door, I jump out of my skin then shout at him, "Stop messing around, I'm not scared." He'd often mess around, so I finish my piss and go looking for him. Nothing. I checked that whole house from top to bottom, expecting him to have found some new awesome hiding place that I hadn't noticed, but no. The only people at home were me, Alan, Mom's BF, and Bonnie the dog. Alan confirmed my bro had left the house hours ago. The voice was unmistakable. It was my brother's voice. I'm certain. I now put it down to imagination, as I have with all of my experiences, but it was so real to me that I simply cannot be sure. Again, I have no satisfactory explanation and refuse to believe in ghosts. Sorry if the stories are boring. In all cases, I'm just giving a true account of what happened and refuse to embellish any details for people's entertainment. That's not why I'm writing this. Also, if anyone has any ideas on these matters or has shared similar experiences, I'd love to hear them. That's the final story that we are showing here, and again, these ones really do feel different than almost every other ghost story I hear about. They really give me that feeling of something I could experience, but could struggle to find an explanation for. I'm not even going to attempt to prove or disprove them either, simply for the fact that when you are dealing with ghosts, it'll naturally just devolve into the age-old question of if ghosts are truly real or not, which isn't something I'm going to get into here. Once again, there were more stories than just the ones I showed, but I chose the ones that I in particular found the creepiest. To close this final post off, I'll just say that the subtlety of these stories, at least compared to most other ghost stories I hear about, was the main reason these ones moved me so much more. It truly makes me think of something somebody would tell me by a campfire, and for that, there was no better way to end the night. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to follow all of our social medias for updates and exclusive content. Those are all linked in the description. We would also love you guys to consider joining our Patreon, Debunk Plus. For only $1 a month, you get access to videos early, exclusive content, and podcasts. We just did a podcast on King Tut, so that should be coming out soon. And of course, make sure to like this video, share this with your friends, and subscribe. As always, my name is Sep from Debunk File. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye. Hi, and welcome to Debunk File. My name is Sep, and today we're going to be going on yet another 4chan deep dive. As a quick warning before this video begins, this episode will feature the discussion of some truly horrific things. All of our 4chan videos wind up getting pretty dark, but this is definitely the darkest one yet. So consider skipping this one if you are sensitive to the discussion of death, blood, gore, and other similarly disturbing things. With this being our 8th 4chan video, Jif and I originally wanted to make this video a special one and cover the worst of the infamous 8chan, but we realized that not only was that not the best idea, but it was also nearly impossible to find any posts on it at all. In case you didn't know, 8chan was basically a substitute for 4chan, where the site's worst members that actually got banned went to regroup somewhere new. They used 8chan so they would have a complete freedom of speech. And, well, the site is basically synonymous with hate speech, Nazis, and all the worst kind of debauchery the internet can offer. Most, if not all of the posts are completely gone as 8chan shut down after a string of shootings that were completely tied to it, and in 2019, it was gone. There isn't much to talk about when it comes to 8chan, nothing specific at least, but we felt we had to mention it at least once in our escapade to bring you the worst that 4chan has to offer. With that out of the way though, let's actually get into our deep dive for tonight. And well, the darkest one is up first. In November of 2014, a user randomly came into the random board with one of the most terrifying posts ever posted onto 4chan. The post itself said, "Turns out it's way harder to strangle someone to death than it is in the movies." The image accompanying it featured a lifeless, naked female body with considerable damage on the throat, and it didn't stop there. After that first post, he posted more images. Under the following one, he said, "She fought so damn hard." Now, 4chan has a very real history of actual fabrication when it comes to supposed members. And so even though the images posted looked incredibly real, people that saw the thread still had their doubts. That's when the OP said to check the news in Port Orchard, Washington in a few hours. He then described his plan to die of suicide by cop, and he subsequently said that he must be going now. Now, right when it was first posted, the claim of the location didn't mean much yet since, of course, it wasn't on the news directly when he posted it, so people still had their doubts. But in a terrifying turn of events, the news would update.
A 33-year-old by the name of David Kalik has been arrested in Oregon after he turned himself in for his own girlfriend in Washington. And then he posted 3 photos of her dead body on an online forum called 4chan.
The man behind the post was David Kalik. He had strangled 35-year-old Amber Copland to death. Most tragic of all, like he said in the final post, her 13-year-old son was the one to find her body. He supposedly wrote messages on the walls and even on her body, and got 82 years in prison, thankfully. We obviously can't show images of the body, nor would we ever want to at all out of respect for everybody associated with this tragedy, but it easily stands as the most depraved moment I've ever seen in these journeys yet. The only other thing left to say regarding this post is simply our best wishes, and our hope that the Copland family is able to eventually heal from something like this. Now, something that is pretty common on 4chan is simply showing your battle stations, aka your gaming setups. Threads are posted daily of various users' setups for everybody else to judge, but there was one instance of this phenomenon where things got weird. It starts normal enough, with multiple people showing off their PC setups until someone posts an extremely off-putting setup with a strange lifelike doll sitting beside a laptop. The caption says, "Well, I think of it as more of a sanctuary than a battle station, but here you go." Users were immediately really creeped out and only get stranger as it goes on. Well, the teddy bear is called Samantha, and she is part of my family. I made her myself. I used the love seat because sometimes I like to move my desk out of the way and change my room into various fantasy themes. This is Samantha's younger sister, Stacy. This is where we hang out and play console games. She loves to have guests, but we never want them to leave. We don't let them. The more it goes on and on, the weirder it gets. He mentions that he never does anything bad or wrong with them, and that they are all part of the family, and that one day you can buy your very own on his website. Whether or not that ever came to fruition is unknown. The last picture in his string of strange posts is eerily haunting. Take a look for yourself. It really reminds me of something like I Feel Fantastic, and even kinda dips into the uncanny valley. The doll shouldn't be there with real people, but there she sits. Honestly, this post doesn't really have too much of a mystery either. You could definitely ask why the hell this person made all these dolls anyways, and what purpose do they truly serve? But it's not going to be too possible for us to answer those questions with what little we have here. These posts just genuinely weirded us out, and for that reason, we knew it had to be included. Be biologist. Be doing biologist. Buddies are setting cam traps on trees while I'm at camp trying to get a fire going. Fire won't catch. Bill sits next to me. Feels cold, but since everything was cold, never cared about it. This fucking lint won't make a spark. Where's Sam with the lighter? Keep complaining for a while. Realize the person next to me isn't talking. Feel a slight chill creeping up my spine. Slowly look ahead. Can see Sam and Bill's flashlights in the woods ahead. Who the fuck is sitting next to me? Turn around, all I see is something black. Nope. Wake up next day. Sam and Bill are standing on top of me, white as milk. I'm laying in the middle of the ground, a little bit away from the camp. They said that they heard screaming. When they came, I was nowhere to be seen. Had spent the whole night looking for me, shouting, yelling. All they got in response was a deep grunt. Try to get up. Pain everywhere. My face when this is what it looked like when they tore my shirt off. My face when I'd torn both my pectoralis, as if I was trying to push/fight something away, to the point where my muscle tore, and broken 5 ribs and a clavic. My face when I'm never doing field trip work again. My face when every night I nope at the slightest feel of something brushing against me. There are 2 this post stand out. The first being that the OP actually posted the damage they supposedly had gotten from the woods, and it is pretty gruesome. This story reminds me a lot of the movie The Ritual, in which campers in the woods awake to painful markings on their chests and are being stalked by a horned creature, although this post came way before the movie. But then there's one other thing. There was a reply that exact same day from a separate user saying this. Fort Campbell, Tennessee. This figure was captured on video in the same area by YouTube user James Jones. I named it Horn Man, but it could just be a bunch of trees. Now that you told your story, it made me think of it. Coincidence, or do we have a real thing here? If it was a bear, you wouldn't be here to post that story. Just saying. As for the actual validity of this post, I'm a little bit torn. It's obviously tough to believe a supposedly supernatural story, but the fact that the OP posted their actual injuries is very intriguing to say the least. You could of course make the argument that the OP got injured some other way and then made a story out of it, but it's up for you to judge how likely that actually is. As for the other post about the supposed YouTube video in the exact same location, I tried searching for it and I couldn't really find it anywhere. The screenshot from the video is pretty intriguing too, but since I can't find any instance of it anywhere at all, I can't really count it as too valid of evidence either. So, make your decision. Personally, I think the evidence does get a bit shallow the more you think about it, but at the same time, it is possible that the injuries did have something deeper to them after all. Whatever the case, I know that I will not be taking a trip to the woods anytime soon. Our final story of the night is a pretty famous one called Fridge Bro. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this post, but if you are not, as a warning, it is absolutely disgusting. And for those that are aware, be sure to stick around, because we found some things about Fridge Bro that not everybody knows. Without further ado, let's get into this. Every night browse 4chan on phone in bed. Drainflies attracted to light so they bounce off phone. Get fed up one night and sob into pillow while drainflies bounce off my head. Dining room table is completely covered in old dishware and beyond mummified food. Plastic milk container rots and explodes. The smell was the most unpleasant thing I've ever experienced. As I'm out walking my dog one day, I keep him outside. A neighbor awkwardly asks why my windows are so dirty, and why I still have Christmas stickers up from like 4 years ago. Just forgot. Ha ha. Get sick and puke all over the toilet. Fall asleep and it's sticky and when I wake up, so I leave it. It's still there and I hover on the toilet now. Fridge won't shut, so it gets filled with bugs and rotten shit. Shove it into a corner and use mini fridge for a month. Eventually take a discarded fridge from neighbor's curb while it's right. Old fridge is still there. The only time I talk to people is when my neighbors say hello while I'm walking my dog every now and then. I have no real friends and no family, and I'm going to be found a rotten husk in my computer chair surrounded by filth when a government worker comes to see why I haven't picked up my NeatBucks check for the month yet. Anybody want some pictures? After saying all this, he proceeded to post some images, and they were among the most purely gross things I have ever seen. And the thought that someone was truly living in a situation this awful actually got under my skin. He even posted more details of exactly how atrocious the living conditions were. It's not ruined. It's got an eco-friendly patina preserving the structure. Mold and fungus are basically the structural backbone of the house. It lives and breathes. And on a hot day outside, the temperature is 12 degrees cooler outside and the air is 80% more moist. It is its own ecosystem of some very niche organisms that have all come together to form a wonderful symbiosis. that started a sealed system of ecology. It's quite amazing, really. The whole thing is one giant organism. I am betting that the organisms living there have evolved a defense mechanism to any new intruding life form, so it achieves a self-reliance. I'm willing to bet that by adding a source of food, you can grow a self-sustained ecosystem that would serve as a repopulation nucleus in the case of a full-on doomsday scenario, such as an all-out nuclear war or asteroid impact. You are doing your part to ensure some form of survival for life. Many more pictures would be posted, each getting grosser and grosser. That's when 4chan spotted sour cream in his rotting fridge and demanded he open it. The thread went absolutely berserk for this sour cream packet to be opened, and to nobody's surprise, it was utterly disgusting. The last thing he posted was the sour cream in the microwave. This would usually be the end of the story, but we found something that furthered the intriguing conversation that is Fridge Bro. It's pretty unknown what happened to Fridge Bro after this 4chan thread ended, and it's a very valid question to ask yourself considering just how bad the living conditions truly were. How was it even possible to live that way for so long? Is he still living that way to this day? Well, believe it or not, somebody actually found arrest papers. These papers showed that the infamous Fridge Bro was 41 to 42 at the time of his original post, and was an unemployed welder residing in Arkansas. The craziest part? The house he was in was a rental. At one point, after not being seen for a while, homeowners went to go look for him, and very quickly realized the condition of his home. Fridge Bro had apparently abandoned the place just a week prior to go see his mother, and eventually fled to Minnesota. Police arrested him at a hotel in Rochester in 2016 for an outstanding warrant related to the damages caused to the rental home, and he was also charged as a fugitive of justice, even though he claimed not to be aware of the warrant. So yeah, the fate of Fridge Bro wound up being way crazier than perhaps any of you may have expected. While we still can't find out what happened to him after 2016, the fact that we found all this is still really crazy. And that'll take us to the end of our dive. If there is any takeaway to make from this video, it's that while something horrific like our first post of the video is undoubtedly terrifying, things like these truly are rare in the realms of 4chan, despite what is often believed. But sometimes the scariest thing about browsing 4chan isn't necessarily that everybody on the website is some crazy fiend. Sometimes it's simply the way in which people live that winds up becoming the most disturbing. Whether that be a decrepit home like Fridge Bro's, or a disturbing doll-infested one like our second posters. 4chan seems to shed a lot of light on the creepy, often gross, and sometimes plain sad living conditions of some people out there. This site is often our only window into the worlds of these people, and also their only outlet. And despite the anonymous nature that the platform will always have, it can still be really telling. Thank you guys so much for watching this installment of our 4chan Deep Dive series. Make sure to follow all of our social medias for updates and exclusive content. They're all linked in the description. We would also love you guys to consider joining Debunk Plus. For only $1 a month, you get access to videos early, exclusive content, and our podcasts, which are coming back. After Jack, it was kind of hard, but they are coming back, we promise. And of course, make sure to like this video, share this with your friends, and subscribe. As always, my name is Seth from Debunk File. Thank you guys so much for watching. Welcome back to another 4chan Deep Dive. We all know why we're here, so without any preamble, let's just get right into our 9th Deep Dive. Enjoy. Starting off strong with our first post of the night, we have a terrifying story that took place deep in the farmland of Wisconsin. 1991 was about 10 years old, poor as dirt, and lived out on a farm. By poor as dirt, I mean we literally had nothing. No TV, no cameras, and besides a radio, nothing. We lived in a really rural area in the northernmost part of Wisconsin, no neighbors for more than a few miles. At home alone because my mom and dad needed to go into town to get some supplies. Listening to some shit I can't remember when someone bangs on the door. Strange, since we normally don't get people out here. Go to the door. There's a fucking crack in the door. Motherfucker hit it so hard there was a crack in it. Peeked through the crack to ask him what was going on. He was naked and covered in blood. Pick related. Ask him what the fuck he was doing on our doorstep. I got in a car accident. Can you let me in to call someone to pick me up? The dude's tone was flat, kinda like how a computer sounds when it speaks. Tell him to get the fuck out before I go all mafia on his ass. He smiles and says that I won't regret it if I let him in. Get freaked the fuck out and run upstairs to get my dad's shotgun. I was a small kid back then, so it was heavy to hold and almost knocked me flat when I first shot it. Motherfucker was reaching through the crack to try and get in. Shoots his ass. I knew I hit him because he pulled the fuck back and started running. Looked out the crack and got ready to shoot him again when I saw him running into the woods on 4 fucking legs.